The sun was setting over the quiet suburban street of Maple Creek, casting long, golden shadows that did nothing to warm the chill in Sarah Miller's heart. She stood at the immaculate kitchen island, her hands gripping the cold marble, staring out at the manicured lawn where her husband, Mark, was absently grilling burgers. The scent of charcoal and seared meat usually meant family, laughter, the comforting rhythm of a Sunday evening. But tonight, it felt like a prop in a play that was about to descend into tragedy. Everything, she thought with a sudden, violent clarity, was about to fall apart. And it had all started with a name whispered in her son's sleep. Her son, Ethan. At 19, he was the family's quiet pride. A sophomore at the State University on a partial academic scholarship, handsome in a thoughtful, understated way, with his father's strong jaw and her own gentle hazel eyes. He was home for the summer, working as a lifeguard at the community pool, his skin perpetually sun-kissed, his hair streaked with gold. To their friends and neighbors, the Millers were the picture of wholesome, American success. Mark, a respected civil engineer. Sarah, a part-time librarian. Their daughter, Chloe, a spirited 16-year-old obsessed with volleyball and TikTok. And Ethan, their steady, reliable eldest. The first crack appeared subtle, a hairline fracture in polished glass. It was a Thursday night, 2 months ago. Sarah had gotten up to get a glass of water, passing Ethan's room. His door was ajar, and she heard his voice, low, tender, a tone she hadn't heard from him before. She paused, thinking he was on the phone with a girlfriend. He'd been secretive about his phone lately, smiling at it with a softness that made her hopeful. Then she heard the name. "Good night, Alex," he'd murmured, the words thick with affection. Sarah had smiled in the dark hallway and padded back to bed. Alex. A nice name. She imagined a bright, pretty girl from one of his sociology classes. She'd mentioned it to Mark the next morning over coffee. Ethan might be seeing someone. And Alex. Mark had grinned, folding his newspaper. About time. Maybe he'll come out of his shell a bit. The shell, however, didn't break open in the way they expected. Ethan became more distracted, more luminous, yet also more anxious. He'd jump when his phone buzzed, often retreating to his room or taking long, mysterious walks. Sarah's librarian mind began to piece together clues. The new, expensive cologne, the extra care with his clothes, the way he'd sometimes look at them all at the dinner table, a strange mix of joy and terror in his eyes, as if treasuring a scene he knew was doomed. The fracture widened one Sunday afternoon. Chloe, sprawled on the living room floor editing a video, called out, "Hey, Ethan, your boyfriend's calling. He's FaceTiming you." The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Sarah, who was arranging hydrangeas in a vase, froze. Mark, tuning his guitar in his armchair, looked up. Ethan, who had been reading on the sofa, went pale, then flushed a deep, furious red. He snatched his phone from the coffee table. "He's not my boyfriend, Chloe. He's just a friend from school. Don't be stupid." His reaction was too sharp, too defensive. Sarah met Mark's eyes across the room. A silent communication passed between them, one born of 22 years of marriage. That was odd. Later, Sarah accidentally saw the screen as Ethan scrolled through his photos. It wasn't a girl named Alex. It was a young man. A handsome young man with a confident smile and dark, curly hair, his arm slung around Ethan's shoulders in a picture taken at what looked like a college football game. Ethan's smile in that photo was the most unguarded, happy expression she had ever seen on him. Her heart didn't sink, it simply stopped, then began hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Alex, a boy. The realization was a cold wave, shocking but not inherently terrifying. Sarah was a modern woman. She worked at a public library. She had LGBTQ+ literature in her displays. She considered herself an ally. But this was her son. This was Ethan. And the theoretical, abstract concept of having a gay son was now a concrete, trembling reality in her kitchen. A reality she immediately knew, with a mother's primal instinct, would shatter her husband's world. Mark Miller was a good man, a devoted father, a reliable provider. He was also the son of a Baptist minister from rural Ohio, a man who had played linebacker in college, who loved John Wayne movies, and whose worldview, while not unkind, was painted in straight, traditional lines. He'd made joking, unthinking comments over the years, "Don't be such a fairy, Ethan," when he was younger, and cried at a skinned knee, "That music sounds a little gay, buddy," that now echoed in Sarah's memory with sinister clarity. To Mark, being gay was an abstract concept, a political topic, something that happened out there, not in his own home, not in his bloodline. Sarah made a choice then, one she would come to regret with every fiber of her being. She said nothing. She convinced herself Ethan would tell them when he was ready. She told herself she was protecting him, protecting the fragile peace of their family. She became a conspirator in silence, watching her son with new, aching eyes, seeing the love that lit him up and the fear that shadowed it. The silence lasted until the barbecue. The night it all ended. Ethan had been quiet all day, jittery. He'd asked if he could invite a friend over. Sure, buddy, Mark had said, flipping a burger. The more the merrier. Who is it? Jake? Ryan? It's Alex, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. You haven't met him. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She was chopping tomatoes, and the knife slipped, nicking her finger. She sucked on the cut, the metallic taste of blood sharp on her tongue. Alex from school? She asked, her voice strangled. Yeah, Ethan said, not meeting her eyes. He was driving through to visit his grandparents. I said he should stop for a burger. Great, Mark boomed, completely unaware. Chloe, set an extra place. When the doorbell rang, Ethan moved like a shot. Sarah watched from the window as he walked to the driveway, where a sleek, black sedan was parked. A young man got out. He was even more striking in person, tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy grace. He was dressed in simple chinos and a polo shirt, but he wore them with a style that seemed inherently urban, sophisticated. He pulled Ethan into a quick, back-slapping hug that lingered just a second too long to be casual. As they walked towards the house, their shoulders touched, and Ethan looked up at Alex with her expression of such naked adoration that Sarah's breath caught. She knew, in that moment, that Alex was not just a crush. This was the love of her son's life. Mark did the introductions on the back patio with hearty, fatherly gusto. Alex, good to meet you. Ethan's told us so little about you. We were starting to think you were a secret agent. Alex shook his hand firmly, a warm, open smile on his face. Sir, it's a real pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Miller, he said, turning to Sarah with genuine warmth in his dark eyes. Ethan talks about you all the time. He says you're the reason he loves to read. His charm was effortless, intelligent. He engaged Mark in a conversation about the engineering marvels of local bridges, complimented Chloe on her volleyball serve after watching a video, and offered to help Sarah bring out the salads. He was perfect, and every perfect interaction was a ticking time bomb. Dinner started smoothly, too smoothly. Alex was witty, regaling them with funny stories from campus that didn't involve Ethan, painting a picture of a vibrant, independent young man. Ethan mostly watched him, a small, blissful smile on his face, interjecting here and there. The sun dipped lower, and Mark brought out beers for the adults and himself, offering one to Alex and Ethan. So, Alex, Mark said, leaning back in his deck chair, his demeanor mellowed by the food and the summer twilight. You got a girlfriend back at school? A handsome guy like you must be fighting them off. The table went silent. The cheerful chatter of crickets seemed to swell, filling the void. Sarah saw Ethan's knuckles whiten around his bottle. Alex, however, didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of his beer, then set it down carefully. He looked at Ethan, a long, deep look that was a conversation in itself. Ethan gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes wide with fear and a desperate hope. Alex turned back to Mark, his expression respectful but unflinching. Actually, sir, I don't. I'm gay. 3 words, simply delivered. They fell into the center of the table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Mark's affable smile didn't disappear, it simply froze, solidified into a rigid mask. He blinked. What? I'm gay, Alex repeated, his voice calm. He then reached under the table, and Sarah saw his hand find Ethan's, lacing their fingers together where they rested on Ethan's knee. It was a gesture of solidarity, of love, of breathtaking courage. But to Mark, it was a declaration of war. The transformation was instantaneous and horrifying. Mark's face, usually so open and ruddy, darkened to a deep plum. The veins in his temple bulged. He stared at their joined hands as if witnessing something obscene, something violently offensive. Ethan? Mark's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, completely unlike his own. Ethan straightened his spine, though he was trembling. Dad, this is Alex. He's my boyfriend. We've been together for 8 months. The word boyfriend detonated the last of Mark's control. He stood up so violently his chair screeched and toppled backward onto the patio stones with a crash. Get your hand off him, he snarled at Alex, the words dripping with venom. Mark, Sarah cried, jumping to her feet. Dad, please, Chloe whimpered, her face pale. Alex released Ethan's hand, but he didn't cower. He stood up, facing Mark with a startling dignity. Mr. Miller, I understand this might be a shock. A shock, Mark roared, his voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. You come into my house, you sit at my table, and you, he was sputtering, his finger jabbing accusingly at Alex, then at Ethan. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of sick joke you two have cooked up? It's not a joke, Dad, Ethan said, his own voice rising with a tremor of defiance. I love him. The word love was the final trigger. Mark lunged, not at Alex, but at Ethan, grabbing him by the front of his shirt and hauling him upright. You don't know what love is. This is perversion. This is a sin. Look at me and tell me this is what you are. Sarah was screaming now, pulling at Mark's arm. Mark, let him go. You're hurting him. Chloe was sobbing. Alex moved to intervene, but Ethan shouted, Alex, no, don't. Mark shoved Ethan back, sending him stumbling into the grill, which rocked dangerously. Get out, Mark hissed at Alex, his body trembling with rage. Get out of my house and never come near my son again. Mr. Miller, I'm not leaving without Ethan, Alex said, his composure finally cracking, raw fear and anger in his eyes. Ethan is my son. He lives under my roof. He follows the rules of this family. And we are not a family of faggots. The slur hung in the air, ugly and final. It seemed to suck all the oxygen from the patio. Ethan's face, which had been flushed with emotion, went deathly white. He looked at his father as if seeing a monstrous stranger. The last vestige of hope in his eyes extinguished. Then I guess I'm not part of this family, Ethan whispered. The words were soft, but they carried more weight than any of Mark's shouts. He turned, walked into the house with a frightening calm. They heard his footsteps on the stairs. No one moved. Mark was heaving breaths, his fists clenched. Sarah was crying silently, her hands pressed to her mouth. Alex stood his ground, his gaze locked on the doorway where Ethan had disappeared. Minutes later, Ethan came back down. He had a single, worn duffel bag, hastily packed. He walked past his father without a glance, went to his mother, and hugged her tightly. She felt his tears hot on her neck. I'm sorry, Mum, he choked out. I'm so sorry. Don't you dare apologize, she whispered fiercely, holding him. Don't you dare. He pulled away, hugged a weeping Chloe. Take care of Mum, he said to her. Then he walked to Alex. Let's go. Ethan, you walk out that door, you don't come back. Mark thundered, but the authority in his voice was now tinged with something else, panic. You choose this lifestyle. You choose it over everything. Your home, your future, your family. Ethan stopped at the edge of the patio, the golden light of the setting sun outlining his figure. He turned one last time. The boy was gone, replaced by a man, heartbroken and resolute. You gave me no choice, Dad, he said, his voice eerily calm. You just showed me exactly who you are, and I can't be the son that person wants. He took Alex's hand, and together, they walked to the car. The engine started, a quiet, efficient hum, and the black sedan pulled out of the driveway of the beautiful house on Maple Creek, turned onto the main road, and disappeared into the gathering dusk. The aftermath was a desolate landscape. Mark stood rigid, a statue of shattered fury and disbelief. Chloe ran upstairs, her sobs echoing through the house. Sarah simply stood amidst the wreckage of the dinner table, the half-eaten burgers, the spilled beer, the overturned chair, and felt the foundations of her life crumble into dust. In the weeks that followed, the Miller house became a museum of quiet grief. Mark oscillated between stubborn, self-righteous anger, he'll come crawling back when he realizes how hard the world is, and deep, silent bouts of a shame he couldn't articulate. He refused to say Ethan's name. Sarah, however, was dying by inches. She called Ethan every day. He was staying with Alex in his apartment in the city, near the university. He'd gotten a second job. He sounded tired, older, but resolute. He asked about Chloe. He never asked about Mark. The real fracture, the one that truly made everything fall apart irrevocably, was between Sarah and Mark. She saw the word in his eyes every time she defended Ethan, every time she cried for him. She saw the disgust he now felt for his own child, and a part of her began to feel a parallel disgust for the man she had loved. The library books on understanding your LGBTQ child that she brought home were accidentally thrown in the recycling. The PFLAG pamphlet she left on his nightstand was found torn in half in the kitchen trash. You're choosing him over our marriage, Mark accused her one night, his voice hollow. You made us choose. Sarah screamed back, all her pent-up agony finally erupting. He's our son. You threw him out for loving someone. How can I ever look at you the same way? The chasm was too wide. It was not just about Ethan anymore. It was about fundamental humanity, about unconditional love, about the soul of their family. Mark's love, Sarah realized, had conditions, and that realization poisoned every memory, every shared dream. 3 months after the barbecue, Sarah was packing a suitcase. Chloe, who had become withdrawn and was seeing a therapist, was staying with a friend for the weekend. Mark watched from the bedroom doorway, his anger finally burnt out, replaced by a hollow devastation. "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice ragged. "To the city. I've rented a small apartment. I need to be near him, Mark. I need to try and fix what I broke by staying silent for so long." "You didn't break anything," he said, but the words had no conviction. "We both did," she said, closing the suitcase. "But you broke it in a way I don't know how to mend. Maybe ever." She visited Ethan and Alex in their modest, sunlit apartment. It was full of books, mismatched furniture, and a sense of peace that was absent from her own beautiful, empty house. She saw the way Alex made Ethan tea without asking, the way their hands brushed when passing a book, the quiet, domestic love that existed between them. It was real. It was beautiful. And her husband had called it a sin. Sarah filed for divorce. The gossip in Maple Creek was vicious, 1,000 speculated stories, but none as tragic as the truth. The family had indeed fallen apart, shattered by a forbidden desire that was only forbidden because one man couldn't see past his own fears. On a cold, bright afternoon in late fall, Sarah sat with Ethan in a coffee shop near his apartment.